Stand on the rim of a quiet ridge in southern Ohio, just before sunset, and you will see a shape in the grass that does not belong to any natural thing. A quick word before we go deeper. These stories don't end. There's a new unsolved one waiting here every night. If that's the kind of thing you'd leave on in the dark, subscribe and I'll keep them coming. The shape is long. It coils across the high ground like a sleeping animal, its body raised in low green humps, its tail wound into a tight spiral at one end. At the other end, its open mouth holds a great oval, like an egg balanced on the tongue of a giant. From the ground you can walk its whole length and feel that something is strange, but you cannot quite see it. From the air, the picture becomes clear. A serpent, a quarter-mile of earth, shaped by patient hands into the body of a snake. The locals call it the Great Serpent Mound. It rests on a wooded plateau in Adams County, above a slow bend of Brush Creek. The land around it is gentle Ohio farm country, all rolling fields and old fence posts and red barns sagging into the soil. Yet the ridge itself is unusual. The rock beneath it is folded and cracked, as if some old force punched up through the ground long ago and left the land confused. No one knows for certain who built the serpent. No one knows exactly when. No one knows why. That last word is the heaviest one. Why? A quarter-mile of curled earth, shaped with such care that its head points straight at the place where the sun sets on the longest day of the year. Why an egg in its mouth? Why a spiral in its tail? Why here, on this strange wrinkled hill, above a buried scar in the bedrock? A quick word before we go deeper. These stories don't end. There's a new, unsolved one waiting here every night. If that's the kind of thing you'd leave on in the dark, subscribe and I'll keep them coming. People have been asking these questions for more than 170 years. Surveyors have measured it. Scholars have argued. Farmers have plowed around it. Photographers have flown over it in small planes and looked down with their mouths open. And still, the serpent keeps its quiet. It does not answer. It only waits. The hill it sits on is shaped like a long finger, pointing roughly to the north. Cliffs drop sharply on three sides, down into the creek valley. Hardwood trees crowd the slopes. Oak, hickory, beech, sycamore. In summer, the leaves close over the trails like a green ceiling, and the air smells of damp moss and warm bark. In winter, the bare branches let the light through, and you can see the snake's whole body from the small stone tower they built beside it. The grass on the mound stays cropped and soft, a paler green than the woods around it, as if even the plants know to behave themselves on its back. Stand on that tower at dusk in late June, and you will see something that has made grown people weep. The sun slides down the western sky. It seems to drift, slow as honey, toward the head of the snake, and then, for one long moment, it rests right between the open jaws, as if the serpent was swallowing the light. The egg in its mouth glows. The coils behind it darken. And whoever built this thing, more than 1,000 years ago, knew exactly where the sun would be on that night. That alone would be a mystery worth a lifetime of study. But it is only the beginning. There may be other alignments built into the curves of the body. There may be a memory in this mound of a great fire in the sky, a comet or a star that exploded and shook the people who watched it. There may be older meanings stitched into the spiral of the tail that we have simply lost. Every time someone digs near the snake, they find new questions and almost no answers. The bones that would tell us who made it are not here. The serpent holds no graves. It carries no treasure. It is only earth, shaped into a story laid out across a hill that should not exist pointing at a sun that keeps its own appointments. Tonight, we are going to walk slowly around it. We are going to listen to the people who tried to read it. And we are going to sit with the question the snake has been asking, quietly, for a very long time. The summer of 1846 came slow to Adams County, Ohio. The hills there roll soft and green, like the back of some sleeping animal that breathes once a century. The land sits in the southern part of the state, where the great glaciers stopped long ago and left the country folded and broken. Creeks wind through the bottoms, limestone bluffs rise pale against the trees, and the Ohio River runs muddy and wide some miles to the south, carrying flatboats and steamboats and stories from town to town. The world back then moved at the speed of a horse. A man walking from Peebles to Sinking Spring might spend the morning on a road that was little more than a wagon rut. Dust hung in the air behind every cart. The smell of wood smoke drifted from chimneys made of fieldstone and clay. Farmhouses stood low and square, built from chestnut logs or rough-sawn pine, their windows small, their porches sagging. Out back, you would find a smokehouse, a spring house for the milk, and a barn whose roof leaned with the years. The farmers who worked that country wore homespun shirts dyed with walnut hulls. Their trousers were heavy wool, patched at the knee. Suspenders held them up. Boots were thick and cracked with mud. The women worked in long skirts and aprons, their hair tied under cotton bonnets to keep the sun off their faces. Light inside the cabins came from tallow candles or a whale oil lamp if the family had the money. After dark, the world shrank down to whatever the flame could reach. The country around what is now called Locust Grove was thick with oak and hickory and beech. In June the leaves hung heavy, and the air smelled of warm sap and wet stone. Cicadas soared in the treetops. Whippoorwills called at dusk. A man crossing those woods at evening would hear his own boots crunching in the leaf mold, and not much else. The farmers had been clearing this land for a generation. Their fathers had come down from Pennsylvania and Virginia after the Revolution, drawn by cheap acres and rich bottom soil. They cut the timber. They burned the stumps. They turned the dirt with iron plows, pulled by mules and oxen. Corn came up first, then wheat, then pasture for sheep and milk cows. The work was slow, and the back never stopped aching, but there was one ridge above Brush Creek where the ploughing went strange. The ground there rose into a long flat plateau, high above the water, with steep sides falling away to the gorge below. And running along the top of that ridge was a low green hump in the grass. A ridge inside a ridge. It curled and bent and stretched for what seemed like forever, twisting through the meadow like a vein under skin. The locals had known about it for years. Some called it the snake. Some called it nothing at all. Cattle grazed across it. Children walked along its spine in the spring, when the wildflowers came up purple and yellow. Nobody could say who had made it. Nobody alive remembered a time before it was there. That summer, 2 men came riding up the wagon road with notebooks in their saddlebags. One was Ephraim George Squire, a young newspaper editor with a sharp eye and a sharper pen. The other was Edwin Hamilton Davis, a country doctor from Chillicothe who had been mapping old earthworks for years. Together they had been crisscrossing Ohio in a long fever of measuring and sketching. They were trying to record every mound and embankment in the state before the plows wiped them off the map. They reached the ridge above Brush Creek on a hot afternoon. The grass was tall. The sun beat down white on their wool coats. They tied their horses to a snake rail fence and walked out onto the plateau with their measuring chains and their compasses and their drawing boards. And what they found took the breath out of both of them. The hump in the grass was a serpent, a 1/4 mile long, its body coiled in 7 great curves across the high meadow. Its tail spiraled tight at one end. Its head pointed toward the cliff. Day worked through the long evening and into the next day. The cicadas soared in the trees above them. The sweat ran down their collars. And the green snake in the grass said nothing at all, holding its shape under the summer sky as if it had been waiting 1,000 years for someone to look. The men who walked that ridge in the autumn of 1846 were not scholars. They were surveyors, farmers, and a country doctor with mud on his boots and a notebook in his coat pocket. Their names were Ephraim Squire and Edwin Davis. One was a newspaper man with restless eyes. The other was a physician from Chillicothe who treated fevers in the morning and measured ancient earthworks in the afternoon. Squire was the talker. He had a thin face, dark hair combed back, and the kind of voice that filled a room without trying. He had come west from New York looking for stories, and he found something better than stories. He found shapes in the ground that nobody could read. Davis was quieter. He carried the instruments, the chains, the brass compass, the leather case of pencils worn down to nubs. Where Squire saw glory, Davis saw geometry. They worked together like 2 halves of a single hand. Squire would stride along the spine of the mound, counting paces, calling out numbers. Davis would crouch beside a wooden stake, scratching figures into the margin of a folded sheet, the pages filled with coils and loops, with neat little notations in faded ink. Their breath fogged in the cool air. Their boots pressed dark prints into the frost. The men slept in farmhouses along the Brush Creek Valley. They ate boiled potatoes and salt pork at long pine tables. They listened to the locals tell stories about the ridge. An old farmer named John Lovett owned the land then. He was a lean man with a sunburned neck and hands like worn leather. He had ploughed around the Serpent for years, never through it. His father had done the same. Nobody in the family could quite say why. The shape just felt wrong to break. Lovett walked the surveyors out to the ridge on their first morning. He carried a tin lantern, even though the sun was up. He pointed with a knobby finger at the long green hump that wound through his pasture. He told them his cattle would not graze on the head of the snake. They would graze on the tail. They would graze on the body. But they always stepped around the open jaws, as if something was set there for them to avoid. Squire wrote that down. Davis did not. Davis was busy stretching a chain along the curve, counting links, marking the slow widening of the coils. A boy named Caleb tagged along behind them most days. He was maybe 12, the son of a neighbor, sent over with a basket of cornbread and apples. He had bare feet, hardened by a summer of running. He carried a slingshot in his back pocket and a question on his tongue every minute of the day. He asked Squire who built the snake. Squire said he did not know. The boy seemed satisfied with that answer, in a way most grown men would not have been. The work took weeks. The 2 men paced off 1,350 feet from the tip of the tail to the open mouth. They measured the width of the body at every coil. They climbed the small platform at the head and stood there as the wind moved the dry grass around their knees. Squire wrote that the serpent appeared to hold something in its jaws, an oval, a great earthen egg raised slightly above the surrounding soil. Davis sketched it 3 different ways before he was satisfied. In the evenings, they sat by the hearth at Lovett's farmhouse and argued in low voices. Squire wanted to call the builders a lost race, a vanished civilization, something romantic and grand. Davis pushed back. Davis believed the people who built the mound were the ancestors of the tribes still living in the region. He had seen too many smaller earthworks across the Ohio Valley to think otherwise. He said as much, gently, the way a doctor delivers difficult news. They did not settle it. They never would. When they left that valley, they took with them a roll of careful drawings, a stack of measurements, and a feeling neither one of them could fully name. Squire called it all in his published book. Davis, in a private letter, called it something stranger. He wrote that the serpent felt watchful. He wrote that the land around it seemed to be holding its breath. He wrote that, on his last evening on the ridge, he had stood at the head of the mound and felt, for one long moment, that he was the one being measured. Then he closed the letter, sealed it with wax, and put the matter aside for the rest of his life. Long before anyone mapped the snake on the ridge, this stretch of southern Ohio had its own quiet rhythm. The land here rolls in soft green waves, hills folding into hills like blankets pulled loose on an unmade bed. Adams County sits in that lucky stretch of country where the woods grow thick and the creeks run clear. Deer drift through the oak shadows at dawn. Crows talk to each other from the tops of sycamores. The people who farmed here in the early 1800s knew the land the way you know the floorboards in your own house. They knew which fields held water after a hard rain. They knew which slopes warmed first in spring. They knew the cold pockets in the hollows where frost still clung when the rest of the world had thawed. Their days moved in slow, steady circles. Plough in March, plant in April, hoe through summer, harvest before the leaves turned, mend fences in the long quiet of winter. When the wind hissed through the bare branches, Brush Creek wound through this country like a lazy silver ribbon. It curled around the bottom of every ridge, carving the soft limestone over thousands of years. The water ran cold and clean. Children waded in it on hot August afternoons. Men washed off the dust of the fields in its shallows. Wagons crossed it at the low fords, where the gravel sat hard under the wheels. And above the creek, on the highest finger of land, sat the plateau. It rose up out of the surrounding country like a long, narrow loaf of bread, steep on three sides, flat on top. The drop down to the creek was almost 100 feet straight, a wall of stone and root and leaning trees. The farmers who took up land here in the years after statehood gave it the kind of names farmers always give odd places. Some called it the bluff, some called it the headland. Most just called it that funny piece of high ground above the creek. It was not good farmland. The soil on top was thin. The slopes were too steep to plough, but the view from the plateau was something to remember. On a clear morning you could see miles of forest fading into haze, and the creek glinting below like a thread of light pulled tight. Men hunting squirrel would climb up there and sit on a fallen log and just look out across the world for a while. They said it was a fine place to eat a biscuit and think about nothing. Life in the surrounding settlements moved with the seasons. There was a grist mill down on the creek with a great wooden wheel that creaked and slapped at the water. There was a blacksmith's shop where the ringing of the hammer carried up the hollow on still afternoons. There was a small log church where the families gathered on Sundays, the men in clean shirts and the women in bonnets, and they sang old hymns through the open windows while the bees worked the clover outside. Children grew up running barefoot through the woods around the plateau. They knew the trails the deer made. They knew where the wild grapes hung heavy in September. They knew the cool seeps where the salamanders lived under flat, wet stones. Some of them must have climbed the bluff 100 times and walked across the top, never thinking much about the strange, long ridge of earth that ran along it. Just a ridge, just a wrinkle in the ground. Cows wandered across it, Squirrels buried acorns in it. The forest had grown right over it, oak and beech and hickory, and their roots laced through the dirt like old fingers. Evenings here were the gentlest part of the day. The light came down, golden through the leaves, and pooled on the forest floor. Smoke rose straight up from the chimneys of the cabins along the creek. Somewhere a hound would bay once and fall silent. Somewhere a fiddle would start up soft on a porch. The whippoorwills began their calling as the dusk settled in, and the calling went on all night, 3 notes over and over, soft as breath. Nobody in Adams County in those years thought there was anything unusual about the plateau above Brush Creek. It was just a place, a high green spine of land, where the wind blew steady and the view ran long. The mystery was already there, sleeping under the leaves, waiting in the shape of the earth itself. But the people who lived all around it walked past it every day without seeing it. They had their work, they had their suppers, they had their slow, ordinary lives ticking along like the wheel down at the mill, and the snake on the hill kept its secret a little longer. The name came before the science, long before the carbon dating and the survey lines, before the airplanes and the satellite maps. Somebody walked up onto that ridge in southern Ohio and saw what was lying there in the grass, and whoever it was, they did not need an expert to tell them what they were looking at. It was a snake, a huge snake, coiled and waiting on the back of the hill, like it had always been there. The story of how the mound got its name is a quiet one. It does not come down to us through any single voice. There is no journal entry, no signed letter, no farmer standing in a doorway saying the words for the first time. The name just grew, the way moss grows on a stone, slow, inevitable. By the time anyone wrote it down, everyone in the county already knew it. The serpent, the great serpent, the snake on the hill. Picture the land the way it looked in those early years. The valley below the ridge was still half wild then, dotted with split-rail fences and small farms tucked between stands of hickory and oak. Smoke curled from stone chimneys in the cool mornings. The Brush Creek wound through the bottoms, brown and slow, fringed with willow, up on the plateau. The grass grew thick and pale green in the summer, and the wind moved through it in long, slow waves. And there, lying across the top of the ridge, was the shape that gave the place its name, a long curving ridge of earth, low and smooth, walking across the grass in 7 great bends, the head pointing west, the tail spiraling tight at the eastern end, like a watch spring. In between those impossible curves, each one balanced against the next, each one moving like a living thing caught in the middle of a long, slow breath. Local people walked it. They walked along the spine of it the way you might walk along a fallen tree. Children climbed on the coils. Old men sat on the head and smoked their pipes and looked out across the valley. The shape was so plain that nobody argued about it. You did not have to squint. You did not have to imagine. The serpent was right there under your boots. But here is the small, strange thing, the first sign, the detail that does not quite fit. The people who lived in that valley in the 1840s were not the people who built the mound. They were settlers, mostly, farmers from Pennsylvania and Virginia, and further east, their grandfathers had not laid those stones in the serpent's belly. Their great-grandfathers had not piled that earth, and yet the name came easily to them, as if it had been waiting on their tongues, as if somebody had whispered it to them in their sleep. There were older names too, names in older languages. The Shawnee had walked that ridge before the settlers came, and so had the Lenape, and so had others before them, going back and back into a time nobody could measure. what they called the place, is not fully written down. Pieces survive, hints, a word here, a story there. But the idea of a serpent on the hill seems to have lived in the country long before the English speakers arrived to give it an English name. It is almost as if the shape on the ground had its own pull, as if anyone who climbed that ridge in any century looked down and saw the same thing and reached for the same word. That is the small light in the wrong place. That is the sound that should not be there, a name that crossed languages, a name that crossed centuries, a name that the land seemed to give to anyone who would listen. Stand on the ridge at dusk, in those early days, and you might have felt it yourself, the cool air moving up from the creek, the smell of wood smoke drifting from a cabin somewhere below, the grass brushing your knees as you walked along the curve, and underneath your feet the slow, patient bend of the earth, rising and falling, like the breathing of something asleep. The settlers did not know who had built it. They did not know when. They did not know why. They only knew what it looked like, and that was enough to fix the name forever. The Great Serpent of Ohio. Lying on its hill, waiting, and somewhere in the back of every visitor's mind, even then, a small question started to form. Not loud, not urgent, just a question drifting up from the grass like mist off the creek at morning. Who taught them to make a snake this big? And what was the snake watching for? Word of the snake on the hill spread the way news always spread in Adams County back then, slowly, from porch to porch, from the blacksmith's open door to the woman hanging wash on the line. By the autumn of 1846, the serpent had become the favorite topic of every general store within 20 miles. Men leaned on flour barrels and traded what they knew. Most of what they knew was guesswork. But guesswork, when stirred with coffee and tobacco smoke, has a way of feeling like truth. The store at Locust Grove was the first place the talk took root. The building was a low wooden thing with a tin roof and a stove black as a kettle. Light came in through 2 narrow windows. The floorboards were soft from years of boots. On any given morning, a half-dozen men gathered there to argue about weather, hogs, and whatever else the day offered. Now they argued about the snake. An old farmer named Ezra came in one cold morning with a folded square of paper in his coat pocket. He smoothed it on the counter under the lamp. He had drawn the mound himself, pacing it out with his own long legs, and the lines were crooked but careful. The coils looped across the page like a river bent back on itself. The head pointed west, the tail curled tight as a watch spring. Men gathered around and stared. Nobody had ever seen the thing drawn before. Seeing it shrunk to paper changed how they thought of it. A trader named Hollis claimed he had seen something like it once before, far to the north near the Muskingum River. He said it had been smaller, just a coil in a meadow, half worn away by deer paths. Nobody could prove him right or wrong, but the story stuck. Other men remembered other shapes. A bear on a hill in Licking County, a bird with spread wings somewhere near the Scioto. The land, it seemed, was full of these old drawings written in dirt, and most folks had been walking past them their whole lives, without looking down. At the tavern in West Union, the talk turned stranger. A glass of cider loosened tongues that the church steps kept tight. One man swore his grandfather had spoken of the snake when he was a boy. The grandfather had come down from Pennsylvania as a young man and had heard from a Shawnee trader that the hill belonged to a spirit, not a god exactly, something older, something that lived in rivers and under stones and sometimes showed itself as a great serpent moving through the grass. The trader had told the grandfather not to plough the ridge. The grandfather had laughed. The grandfather had also, the man admitted, never plowed the ridge. The Methodist preacher heard these stories and did not like them. He stood on the church steps one Sunday and warned his flock against pagan talk. The mound, he said, was only earth, dirt piled by men long dead. To speak of spirits was to speak against Scripture, but even the preacher could not stop the stories. They moved through kitchens and around supper tables, and along the creek banks where children fished. By winter, everyone in the county had heard at least 3 different versions of what the serpent was. Some said it marked a buried king. Some said it marked a buried treasure. Some said it was a warning, a sign placed by an old people to keep other people away from something terrible underneath. A widow named Martha Cole, who lived alone in a cabin near the bluff, told anyone who would listen that on still nights she could hear the hill humming, not loud, just a low note, like a finger drawn around the rim of a glass. Most folks chuckled at Martha. A few stopped chuckling after they walked up there themselves. The first strange maps began to circulate that winter. Hand-drawn copies of Ezra's sketch, traded for eggs or whiskey. Each copy lost something and added something. The coils grew tighter on one map and looser on another. The head pointed west on every version, though, because that part everyone agreed on. The head pointed west, toward the setting sun, toward the place where the day ended. Nobody yet knew why. Nobody yet thought to wonder if the snake was watching a particular sunset on a particular day of the year. That idea would not come for another generation. For now, the people of Adams County only knew they had something old and strange on a hill above their creek, and they passed the knowledge hand to hand, like a candle in the dark. By the late 1880s, the snake on the hill was in trouble. The farmers who first cleared the ridge had been respectful enough, they left the coils alone, plowed around them, treated the great curving ridge as a thing not to be disturbed. But the land changed hands, as land does. New owners came who saw only soil, soil that could grow corn, soil that could be turned and sold and turned again. Plows began to creep closer to the serpent's body. Cattle wandered over the tail and pressed the earth flat under their hooves. Curious visitors carried away pieces of it in their pockets, the way people sometimes carry sand from a famous beach. Each small theft seemed harmless. Together, they were eating the snake alive. A quarter-mile of ancient earth was dissolving back into the hilltop, year by year, season by season. Word of this slow disappearance traveled east. It reached the desk of a man named Frederick Ward Putnam, who worked at the Peabody Museum at Harvard. Putnam was a careful man with a soft beard and a steady gaze. He had spent his life looking at old bones and broken pots and trying to understand the people who left them behind. When he heard that Ohio's great serpent was vanishing under the plow, he packed a bag and traveled west to see it for himself. What he found stopped him cold. He stood on that lonely plateau in the spring of 1885 and walked the full length of the coils. The grass was tall and pale green. The earth beneath his boots was soft from rain. He followed the body of the snake from the curled tail to the open mouth, and by the time he reached the oval, he understood something that he could not quite put into words. This place was not just an old earthwork. It was a kind of sleeping language, a message written by hands that had been gone for 1,000 years or more, and the message was being scrubbed away. While he watched, Putnam went home and began to raise money. He wrote letters, he gave talks, he spoke to wealthy women in Boston parlors about a hill in Ohio that none of them had ever seen. He told them the snake was real. He told them it was older than anyone could prove. He told them it would be gone in a generation if nobody acted. The women listened. They opened their checkbooks by 1887. Enough money had been gathered to buy the land outright, roughly 60 acres of ridge and forest, including the entire body of the serpent, passed into the care of the Peabody Museum. The plough stopped at the property line. The cattle were turned away. Putnam came back to dig. He worked for 3 summers on that hilltop, slow and patient, peeling back the soil in thin layers. He found ash. He found small bits of charcoal. He found stones that had been arranged with care along parts of the body. He did not find what he most wanted to find, which was a burial. Not a single bone lay beneath the serpent, not a tooth, not a finger. The snake guarded nothing but itself. When he was finished, Putnam did something that would shape the story of the mound forever. He restored it. He took the worn and trampled coils and built them back up to what he believed was their original height. He smoothed the curves. He firmed the tail. He laid fresh sod over the wounded places. The serpent that visitors see today is partly the work of ancient hands and partly the work of a Harvard man with a shovel and a vision. Some people would later say this was a mistake, that Putnam's restoration mixed the old with the new in ways that could never be untangled, that every later attempt to date the mound, to test its soil, to read its true age, would be confused by the dirt he brought in. Others say he saved it, that without his sod and his stakes and his careful hands, there would be no serpent left at all. Only a faint ripple in a cornfield, the way most ancient things end. Both things are true. The snake was saved. The snake was changed. The story of the mound after 1887 is the story of a creature kept alive by a stranger who loved it without ever knowing who built it. Putnam handed the land to the state of Ohio in 1900. He died 15 years later, still uncertain about the makers, still puzzled by the alignment, still unable to answer the simplest question of all: who and when and why. Dirt does not wear a wristwatch. That is the first thing anyone learns when they try to figure out how old the Serpent Mound really is. You can hold a clay pot and read the shape of it. You can lift a flint blade and see who chipped it. But a pile of carried earth, shaped by hand and packed by foot, keeps its secrets the way a pond keeps its bottom, hidden under green water. For a long time, nobody even tried. The early visitors stood on the ridge, scratched their chins, and wrote whatever felt true that morning. Some said the snake was 1,000 years old. Some said 5,000. Some shrugged and called it ancient, and let the word do all the work. Then came Frederick Ward Putnam, the Harvard man with the careful hands. In the late 1880s, he walked the back of the serpent with a notebook and a small brush. He dug trenches across the body, slow and neat, like a surgeon opening a sleeping patient. He pulled out charcoal flecks. He pulled out bits of broken stone. He pulled out the dark stains where old fires had once burned. And he did the best he could with the tools of his time, which were mostly guesswork and good eyes. Putnam thought the Adena people made the mound. The Adena were an older culture, builders of round burial hills, makers of pipes carved like sleeping men. Their bones lay in the smaller mounds nearby, almost within shouting distance of the serpent. To Putnam, the snake felt Adena. It felt old in the way Adena things felt old. 2,000 years or more, back when Rome still had emperors. That answer held for almost 100 years. It went into the books. It went onto the little wooden signs along the path. School children learned it. Tour guides repeated it. The Adena built the snake. End of story. Then, in the 1990s, a small team came back with new tools. They took fresh samples from deep inside the body of the mound. They picked out tiny pieces of charcoal, no bigger than a fingernail clipping. They sent these scraps to a lab in Arizona, where machines could count carbon atoms one by one. The numbers came back, and the numbers did not say what anyone expected. The charcoal was young, not Adena young, not Roman Empire young. The samples pointed to a date around the year 1070. That was almost 1,000 years after Putnam's guess. That was Fort Ancient time. That was the era of stone hoes and cornfields, of villages along the river bends, of a people who came later and lived differently. The news rolled through the small world of mound scholars like a stone dropped in a still pond. If the Fort Ancient people built it, then everything written on the wooden signs was wrong. If the Adena built it, then the charcoal samples must come from someone who only repaired it, only walked across it later, only camped on its back for a single warm night, 1,000 years after the work was done. Then came another study, and another. The dates began to argue with each other. One sample whispered Adena, another shouted Fort Ancient, a third sat somewhere in the middle, refusing to take a side. The Serpent, it seemed, did not want to be pinned to a single moment. Some scholars now think both stories are true. They believe the Adena built the first version, a smaller and simpler snake, and that the Fort Ancient people came along centuries later and rebuilt it, sharpened its curves, added the oval at the mouth, made it the thing we see today, a snake remade by different hands, each generation adding its own breath. Others disagree. They say one people made it, start to finish, and the strange dates come from old fires that drifted up from older soil layers below. They say the lab samples got mixed. They say the charcoal lied. This is the trouble with dating old dirt. Dirt moves. Worms turn it. Rain shifts it. Roots push through it. Animals burrow under it. And every century, the people walking on top of it leave a little ash, a little bone, a little broken pot, all of which sink down into the layers and confuse the timeline below. Someone trying to find the truth in the soil of Serpent Mound is reading a book where the pages have been shuffled. The story is there, the words are there, the order is gone, and the snake on the ridge keeps its own counsel, coiled in green grass under a wide Ohio sky, waiting for a question nobody has learned to ask correctly yet. For more than 100 years, the question of who built the serpent has lived inside the minds of the people who studied it. And the strangest part of that long argument is how personal it became. The diggers, the scholars, the quiet local historians, they all came to feel something about this hill. They walked the coils. They sat by the head at dusk, and many of them, over the years, left small written notes about what the place did to their thinking. One of the earliest was a man named Frederick Putnam. He wrote in a soft, careful hand about the months he spent camped on the bluff in the 1880s. He said the mound felt older than anything he had ever touched. He wrote that he would stand at the tail in the evening, where the spiral curls in on itself like a sleeping cat, and he could not shake the sense that the serpent had been made by people who knew the sky better than he ever would. He believed, deep in his bones, that the builders were of the Adena culture, an ancient people who shaped the Ohio Valley 2,000 years before his lifetime. He never quite proved it, but he wrote in one quiet line that the earth under his shovel felt like a prayer that had not finished being spoken. Decades later, another voice entered the long argument. A young archaeologist named James Griffin came to the bluff in the 1940s. He wore wool trousers and carried a small leather notebook. He sat on the head of the serpent and ate his lunch there, watching the river fog rise from the valley below. Griffin believed the mound was younger. He believed the builders were the fort ancient people who lived in this country only 1,000 years ago. He said the soil told him so. He said the broken bits of pottery near the mound, the small round dwellings buried in the nearby fields, all whispered a later date. He wrote that he felt almost shy disagreeing with Putnam. The old man heard one song, Griffin wrote. I think I hear a different one. In the 1990s, a team led by a careful woman named Bradley Lepper came back to the site with new tools. They pulled tiny pieces of charcoal from inside the body of the serpent. They tested those flakes with machines that could count atoms, and the numbers they got back surprised them. Some flakes pointed to the Adena, some pointed to the Fort Ancient. Lepper later said, in a soft interview, that she had stood on the mound at sunset and laughed out loud. She said the serpent was refusing to choose a maker. She said it felt almost like the hill was teasing her. A park ranger named Delcy Wilson, who walked the path around the Coils for nearly 20 years, told a small story to a local newspaper in 2003. She said she had stopped trying to decide which people built it. She said she had come to think both did. She told the reporter that on autumn mornings, when the mist gathered in the low places between the curves, she sometimes pictured two different groups of builders, separated by 1,000 years, working on the same patient shape. One group beginning, another group returning, each adding its own quiet layer to a story neither finished alone. A retired school teacher named Marvin Eldridge, who grew up on a farm just down the road from the bluff, wrote a letter to his grandson before he died. The letter has been kept in a small archive in Adams County. In it, Marvin said his own grandfather used to take him to the mound on summer evenings in the 1930s. They would walk the spine of the snake together, slowly, while the fireflies came up from the grass like sparks from a low fire. Marvin's grandfather always told him the same thing. He said the people who made it were not one people. He said they were many. He said the serpent belonged to anyone who ever climbed the hill to look at it. These voices do not solve the argument. The Adena hypothesis still has its quiet defenders. The Fort Ancient theory still has strong evidence behind it. The carbon dates still scatter across the centuries, like seeds blown in different directions. But what every witness seems to share, from Putnam to Lepper to the school teacher with his fireflies, is a feeling that the mound is bigger than any single answer, that the long argument might itself be part of the serpent's design, that the hill on the bluff was built perhaps to keep the question alive. There is something strange about the ground beneath the serpent, not the soil itself, but the shape of the land it lies on. The plateau where the mound rests is not a normal hill. It is a curved ridge, bent and broken, lifted up where it should lie flat. Geologists noticed this long before anyone could explain it. If you stand at the snake's head and look out, the land falls away in a slow curve. The ridge bends like a saucer's rim. Brush Creek loops below in a long brown ribbon, cutting through limestone the color of old bone. The trees grow thick on the slopes, oak and hickory and pawpaw, their roots gripping a stone that does not behave the way nearby stone behaves. The rocks here are tilted, some are crushed, some are twisted into angles that make no sense for the quiet hills of southern Ohio. For a long time no one knew why. The early surveyors saw the strange uplift and shrugged. They mapped what they could and moved on. The farmers plowed their fields and noticed only that the soil was poor in places and rich in others. The serpent sat on top of it all, calm and coiled, keeping its secret. Then, in the middle of the 20th century, scientists came back with better tools. They drilled down, they studied the broken rock, they found something that should not be there. The stone beneath the serpent had been shattered by a great force, long, long ago. The layers were folded back on themselves like the pages of a book slammed shut. The minerals showed signs of sudden heat and pressure, the kind of pressure that does not come from rivers or wind or slow time. The conclusion came slowly, the way conclusions do when they sound impossible. The plateau is a crater, an ancient one. Something fell from the sky here hundreds of millions of years ago and struck the earth so hard it cracked the bedrock for miles around. The hills you see today are the soft weathered ghost of that wound. The curve of the ridge is the curve of the rim. The serpent rests on the edge of a scar older than any human memory. This is where the story begins to rhyme, because the people who built the mound could not have known about cratering. They did not have drills or microscopes. They could not read the broken minerals in the deep stone. And yet, of all the hills in Ohio, of all the ridges and bluffs and valleys, they chose this one. They climbed this specific bent ridge and laid their great snake along its spine. Coincidence is a word that gets tired in a place like this. The builders chose a spot where the land already felt raw, where the ground hummed with old violence, the way a struck bell hums long after the strike. They may not have known the science, but they knew something. They felt it. The way a horse feels a storm coming, the way a dog stares at an empty corner of a room. And the shape they built fits the place too well to be accident. The serpent's body curves with the curve of the ridge. The coils follow the natural rise and fall of the earth. The head points outward, toward the bend in the creek, where the cliff drops sharply and the sky opens wide. If you trace the snake from above, it looks less like a thing placed on the land and more like a thing growing out of it, as if the land itself dreamed the serpent into being and the builders only helped finish the dream. Now consider the layers. A crater older than the dinosaurs. A people who arrived thousands of years ago and built upon it. A second people, perhaps, who rebuilt or repaired it later. And then the long silence, the forest growing back, the farmers, the surveyors, the scholars, all standing on the same wounded ground without knowing what lay beneath. Each generation read the place differently. Each one left a mark. The snake outlasted them all. There is a pattern forming here, the way frost forms on a window. The mound is not just a mound. The hill is not just a hill. The story keeps doubling back on itself. The same details surfacing in different mouths and different centuries. A wound in the earth, a serpent on the wound. A sky that the builders watched with great care. People who knew where to put the snake even when they could not have known why the place was special. The pieces have not yet snapped together, but they are beginning to lean toward one another, the way iron filings lean toward a hidden magnet. Now we come to the part of the story that makes people stand still on that hilltop in southern Ohio. The part that has kept scholars circling back to this place for more than 100 years. The part that has no easy answer. On most days, the serpent looks like a long ribbon of grass-covered earth, peaceful and still. The mound sleeps under the sun, like an old animal sunning itself on warm stone. The grass turns silver in the wind. Crows land on its back and walk along the ridge, as if it were a green road. But on one morning of the year, something happens. Something the builders may have planned. Something nobody can quite explain. That morning is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. The day the sun climbs higher than any other and seems to hang in the sky a moment longer before it begins its slow slide back toward winter. On that morning, the sun rises in a very particular spot above the trees of southern Ohio, and when it does, it rises directly in line with the head of the serpent. The serpent's head points to the northwest. That is the strange thing. Snakes carved into earth across the continent face many directions, but this one points the way the sun sets on the longest evening and the way it rises on the longest morning of the year. The head and the oval at its mouth seem to gaze straight into that golden door in the sky. If you stand at the head of the serpent, at dawn on the solstice, the sun lifts itself from the horizon and pours warm light along the curving body behind you. The coils glow. The shadow of the ridge stretches long across the grass. The mist that gathers in the valley below burns away in slow ribbons. It feels, witnesses say, like the snake is drinking the sun. The alignment is not a small thing. It is not a guess made from a single rough measurement. Surveyors have walked the mound with instruments that read the land to the inch. They have charted the head, the neck, the 7 coils, the spiral tail. They have laid the geometry against the path of the sun across 2,000 years of slow shift in the sky. And the head of the serpent points where the solstice sun has pointed for a very long time. Some say the builders chose this hilltop for that reason alone. They walked the ridges of Adams County. They watched where the sun cleared the eastern hills in midsummer. They felt the warm breath of the longest day on their faces, and they marked it with a snake of stone and clay, a 1/4 mile long. Others are not so sure. They point out that snakes wind. They turn. A long curving figure on a curving ridge will line up with something, somewhere, no matter how it is laid. Find enough stars and enough mornings, and any shape can be made to speak. That argument has weight. It is fair and careful. But the head is the part that troubles the skeptics. The head is not a coil. The head is a clear, simple line, and that line points where the sun comes up on the day the year turns. The oval at the mouth makes the picture stranger still. Some call it an egg. Some call it the sun itself, held in the serpent's jaws. Some call it the eye of the world. Whatever it is, on the morning of the solstice, the rising sun lifts itself out of that oval, as if the snake had been holding it through the long night and was letting it go. People who have stood on the hill on that morning describe a quiet that is hard to put into words. The birds have started their songs. The dew is still on the grass. The first warmth of the day touches the back of your neck, and the great curving body behind you seems for one moment to be alive. Then the sun keeps rising. It climbs above the trees. The shadow shortens. The mist burns off. The serpent is only a mound again, grass and earth, a green road on a green hill. But for that handful of minutes, every summer, the alignment holds. The geometry speaks. And whoever built this thing, whenever they built it, knew exactly what they were doing. That is the heart of the mystery. Not whether the alignment exists, because measurement after measurement says it does. The mystery is why. The mystery is what the builders saw in that sunrise that was worth a 1/4 mile of moved earth. Nobody alive can answer that. The people who knew are gone. The serpent does not speak. It only waits, year after year, for the longest day to come around again. The sun is one part of the story. The moon is another, and the moon, as it turns out, may have left its own quiet signature along the body of the serpent. To understand this, you have to know something strange about the moon. It does not rise and set in the same place every month. Its path drifts over the course of about 19 years. The moon's rising and setting points slide slowly along the horizon, swing out to their farthest reach, and then drift back again. The far edges of that swing are called the lunar standstills, the northern and southern moments when the moon climbs as high or sinks as low as it ever will. Most people alive today have no idea this rhythm exists. The sky above their porch is just the sky, but for people who watch the heavens night after night, year after year, generation after generation, the slow dance of the moon would have been as familiar as the turning of the seasons. And here is where the serpent grows strange. The body of the mound is not a simple line. It coils. It curls in long looping bends, each one bending east, then west, then east again, like a great snake easing itself across the ridge. For a long time, people assumed those curves were just artistic. A serpent moves in curves. After all, why would a builder draw it any other way? Then surveyors began to measure. They laid their instruments along each curve of the body. They marked where each coil pointed. They charted the lines against the horizon as it would have looked centuries ago, before the trees grew tall, before the fences came, before the road cut through the field below. And what they found made some of them go quiet. The curves of the serpent's body seemed to point, one after another, at the moon's rising and setting positions across the long 19-year cycle. The northern standstill, the southern standstill, the moments in between, the very places on the horizon where the moon in its slow drift would touch and turn back. If the measurements are right, the body of the serpent is not just a snake, it is a kind of calendar written in dirt, a record of the slow breath of the moon, drawn into the earth in long sweeping curves. There are people who study these things who believe the alignment is real. They point to the angles, to the geometry, to the way each coil seems to settle on a meaningful point in the sky. They argue that whoever built this mound did not simply pile up earth in the shape of a snake. They drew the sky onto the land. There are other people who study these things, who push back. They say the human eye loves patterns. Give a person enough lines and enough horizon points, and they will find connections everywhere. They argue that some of the alignments are loose, that the serpent's curves are not precise enough to prove intent, that what looks like a moon calendar might just be a beautifully made snake that happens to bend in directions the sky also bends. Both sides have a point, and both sides are still arguing. But here is the detail that sits in the mind and refuses to leave. To track the moon's full cycle, a person must watch the sky for 19 years, not 19 days, not 19 months, 19 years of patient looking. A child born when the watching began would be nearly grown when it ended. Whole lives would be lived inside one full breath of the moon. To build a monument that records that cycle, the builders would have had to know it, truly know it, across generations, passed from grandmother to mother to daughter, from elder to apprentice, in unbroken memory. That is not a small thing. That is a civilization holding the rhythm of the sky in its hands for centuries. And whether the alignment is real or imagined, the question itself changes how you stand on that ridge. You look at the long body curling away from you through the grass, and you wonder what those curves were meant to remember. You wonder how many quiet nights of watching went into each bend. You wonder how many names of moons, now forgotten, were once spoken aloud as someone pressed another basket of clay into place. The sun touches the head on the longest day. The moon, if the measurers are right, walks slowly along the tail, across the long count of years. One bright moment, and one slow, patient drift, both written into the same hill, both still waiting to be fully understood, both keeping their own quiet time, long after the people who set the rhythm have gone. Now let's sit with the doubters for a while. Every good mystery has them, and the Serpent Mound has more than its share. These are careful people, patient people, the kind who look at a quarter-mile earthen snake and refuse to be dazzled by it. They have good reasons, and to tell their story honestly, you have to hear them out. The first thing the skeptics point to is the oval, that strange egg shape held in the open jaws of the serpent. Believers see it as the sun on the solstice morning, swallowed by the snake. They see a cosmic event carved into clay and grass. The doubters see something simpler. An oval is just an oval. It might be an egg. It might be a frog. It might be the eye of the serpent itself, opened wide and watching the valley below. The shape is open to 100 readings, and the people who built it left no plaque behind to tell us which one is right. The skeptics push harder. They say that when you look for alignments in any large object, you will find them. A snake, stretching a quarter mile across a hilltop, has so many curves and angles that some of them must, by pure chance, point towards something interesting in the sky. The sun rises somewhere every morning. The moon rises somewhere every night. If you draw enough lines, eventually one will land on a meaningful point. This is the problem of looking back at old things with modern eyes. We see patterns because our brains crave them. The builders may have meant nothing of the kind. There is a name for this trick of the mind: pareidolia, the same instinct that makes us see faces in clouds and rabbits in the moon. The doubters say the solstice alignment of the serpent's head is a story we tell ourselves. The builders piled up dirt in the shape of a snake because snakes were sacred, nothing more, nothing less. The sun happens to rise where it rises, and the dating gives them more ammunition. Carbon samples from the mound have come back with wildly different numbers. Some suggest the snake is nearly 3,000 years old. Others place it closer to 900. If the experts can't agree on when it was built, how can anyone claim to know why it was built? A solstice alignment means one thing if the builders lived in the time of the Adena, and something else entirely if they lived in the time of the Fort Ancient. The skeptics say we are reading a book whose pages have been shuffled. They have a point about the diggers too. 19th century excavators were not gentle people. They cut into the snake. They moved earth. They restored what they thought was missing. The mound you see today is not exactly the mound the builders left. So when modern surveyors measure the angle of the head against the rising sun, they may be measuring the work of a Victorian gentleman with a shovel, not the work of an ancient hand. These are sober arguments. They deserve respect. The Serpent Mound has been the subject of more wishful thinking than almost any other site in North America. People have called it the work of lost tribes, sunken continents, visitors from the sky. The skeptics have spent a long time clearing away that fog, and the picture they leave behind is humble and honest. And yet, there is one thing the doubters cannot quite explain, one thing that makes even the most careful scholar pause. It is the location. The serpent does not sit on just any hill. It sits on the rim of an ancient crater, a wound in the earth made by something that fell from the sky millions of years before any human walked the valley. The rocks beneath the mound are folded and shattered in ways found nowhere else for hundreds of miles. The builders chose this exact place. Out of all the hills in Ohio, they chose the one that had been struck by a falling star. The skeptics shrug at the alignments. They shrug at the oval. They shrug at the dating debates. But when you ask them why the snake lies on a crater, the answers grow softer. Coincidence, some say. The high ground simply offered a good view. Others fall quiet altogether, because the builders had no way of knowing what lay beneath their feet, no way to see the buried scar. And still, somehow, they placed their serpent there, as if the ground itself had whispered to them, as if the snake knew where to lie down long before the first basket of clay was carried up the hill. Some people walk the length of the serpent and feel nothing but the cool grass under their shoes. Others walk it once and never quite come back the same. The believers belong to that second group. They are the ones who looked up from the coils, watched the sun fall into the head on a midsummer evening, and felt something old click into place inside their chest. They don't shout about it. They speak in the quiet, even voice of people who have already made peace with not being believed. Among them was a man named William Romaine. He came to the Serpent with a surveyor's eye and a long ruler and a stubborn patience. He measured the curves. He plotted the angles. He stood on the head at sunrise and at sunset, and he made notes that filled whole books. What he found, he said simply, was that the builders had been watching the sky, not casually, not by accident. They had been watching it the way a sailor watches the stars over an open sea, with their lives stitched to the pattern of the lights above. Romaine pointed to the coils and said each bend held a moment. The solstices, the equinoxes, the slow swing of the moon as it drifted across the years. He laid his maps out on tables and showed people what he saw. Some nodded, some smiled the polite smile that means they think you've spent too long alone with your charts. He did not seem to mind. He had walked the ground. He had measured the shadows. He knew what he knew. Another believer was a woman named Clark Hardman, who worked with her husband through the long summers of the 1970s. They camped near the bluff. They watched the sun rise over the head of the Serpent on the longest day of the year. They felt the heat of June come up out of the river valley and settle on their skin like a slow breath. And they wrote in careful, steady words that the alignment was real. The builders had aimed the head at that exact point on the horizon. The chance of accident was almost none. The Hardmans were not chasing fame. They were not selling anything. They were two people who had stood in a place at a certain hour and seen something line up the way a key slides into a lock. They published their findings. They waited. The arguments came, as arguments always do. They answered them quietly and kept walking the ridge. There are others too, local people who have lived their whole lives within sight of the bluff, farmers who can tell you where the sun comes up in every month of the year, because they have watched it from the same porch for 60 seasons. Park rangers who have stood on the head at dawn so many times they no longer count. Astronomers from small colleges who came once to humor a friend and stayed the rest of the week. Each of them carries a small, private certainty. The mound is pointed at the sky. The builders meant it to be. What did it cost them to say so? For some, a little laughter at the wrong dinner table. For others, a paper rejected, a grant denied, a colleague who stopped returning calls. The world of careful science can be a cold room for those who speak of solstice alignments and ancient knowledge. The believers learn to keep their voices low and their evidence neat. They learn to let the ground speak for itself. And what did they gain? They gained the morning of June 21st, when the sun lifts itself out of the eastern trees and rolls down the open jaw of the Serpent like a slow gold coin. They gained the long blue hour after a winter sunset, when the coils hold the last light and the river below turns to dark glass. They gained the feeling of standing inside someone else's prayer, a prayer made of dirt and grass and patience, written so large that only the sky could read it. They will tell you, if you ask, that the builders watch the same stars they watch, the same sun, the same slow moon. They will say that the people who shaped this hill were not strangers. They were watchers, like us. They were keepers of time, and the Serpent is what they left behind so that the watching would not be forgotten. The believers do not need you to agree. They have already stood on the head at dawn. They have already seen the line drawn between the dirt and the sun. They walk back down the path with the calm of people who have heard an answer, even if the answer came in a language nobody fully remembers. Walk the ridge above Brush Creek on a still autumn morning, and the land starts to speak in a language older than English. The ground here remembers things. You can feel it under your boots, in the way the soil rises and falls, in the way the trees lean. The plateau sits like a hand held flat against the sky, and every ridge, every gully, every odd bend in the creek below seems to point back towards the Serpent. Locals have noticed it for generations. The oaks on the eastern slope grow with a strange tilt, their trunks twisting just slightly, as if some old wind pushed them sideways and they never straightened out. Walk those trees in winter, and the bark glows silver in the low sun. The branches throw shadows that fall in long ribbons across the snow. Foresters who have spent their lives in these hills say the wood from this ridge cuts differently, tighter rings, denser grain. Whether that means anything, no one can say. The ground itself holds secrets that builders have learned the hard way. Try to sink a deep foundation anywhere along the plateau's edge, and you'll hit something odd. Layers of crushed stone that don't match the bedrock below, pockets of clay, the color of old bricks, seams of black soil running through pale earth like veins through marble. The plateau is a wound that healed strangely. Geologists call it the impact structure. Farmers used to call it the bad ground, the part of the field where the plow caught on things it shouldn't have. Brush Creek loops around the base of the cliff in a slow, lazy curve. But study old surveyor maps from the early 1800s, and you'll see the creek used to run a slightly different path. It shifted west in some long ago flood, leaving a curl of low ground that fills with mist most mornings. That mist rises off the old creek bed in pale columns. It gathers around the base of the bluff and climbs the hill in slow drifts. From the Serpent's Head, looking down at sunrise, the fog can look like a second river, a ghost river running where the water used to flow. Animals know the plateau in their own quiet way. Deer cross it freely in the cooler months, but in midsummer the meadow at the heart of the effigy goes oddly still. Hunters have written about it for over a century. The squirrels chatter at the edges and stop at the line of trees. The crows lift off the oaks and circle wide, never quite settling on the serpent itself. Nothing dramatic, nothing frightening, just a small hush, as if the animals are being polite to something they sense, and we don't. The story passed down in the valley says the land remembers a night of fire. The Shawnee who lived along these waters spoke of a time when the sky burned bright as morning and a great light fell. Some of those stories may be old echoes of comets people watched in their own lifetimes. Some may be older still, passed mouth to mouth across so many winters that the original night has blurred into legend. One version places the burning visitor in the time the great hand pressed the hill flat. Another places it much later, in a year the English would one day call 1066, when a comet hung in the sky over half the world and frightened kings on distant thrones. That comet, the one we now call Halley's, returned in the spring of that year. People in Europe saw it and wove it into tapestries and chronicles. People in China wrote it down. People in the Ohio Valley would have seen it too, burning slow across the same night sky, low in the west after sunset. Some researchers have looked at the radiocarbon dates from the serpent's body and noticed they hover near that century. They wonder if the builders, watching that bright traveler, decided to shape a great snake on a hill to mark what they had seen. Other researchers think the dates point to older work, and that the comet had nothing to do with it. The land won't say which group is right. What the land does say, it says quietly. The oaks lean, the mist gathers, the creek runs in its new bed, and remembers its old one. The bad ground refuses foundations, and the serpent lies along the ridge, head pointed west toward where a burning visitor once crossed the sky, mouth open around something round and bright, holding a question that the hills have been holding for 1,000 years or more. The 1066 sky was not the only sky that ever caught fire. Long before that comet streaked over England and bled into the tapestries of medieval Europe, other lights had blossomed in the dark above the woodlands of North America, and some of them stayed. There is a quiet theory, whispered by stargazers and amateur scholars, that the Serpent Mound was not built to watch the sun at all. It was built to remember a night when a star died. They call it the Supernova theory, and nobody can prove it, but nobody can quite kill it either. The idea goes like this: somewhere between the year 1000 and the year 1100, the sky above eastern North America hosted more than one strange visitor. There was Halley's Comet in 1066, yes, but there were also bright stars that appeared from nowhere. New stars, suns being born, or suns dying, depending on which astronomer you ask. The Crab Nebula supernova lit up the heavens in 1054. For weeks it shone so bright you could read by it at midnight. Chinese astronomers wrote it down. Arab scholars wrote it down. And the people who walked the ridges of southern Ohio almost certainly saw it too. The supernova theory says that some of those people lifted their eyes one summer evening and saw a wound open in the dark, a point of light where no light had been. And they did what people have always done when the sky changes. They tried to hold the memory in something that would not fade. So they shaped a serpent, a long coiled body to mark the path of the heavens, an oval at the mouth to mark the place where the new star burned. The eastern woodlands knew the serpent as a creature of sky and water both, a being that swallowed and birthed lights, a keeper of cosmic events. To carve one onto a ridge above a buried crater, with its head turned toward the solstice and its body curling beneath the stars, would have been a way to fix the moment in earth, a monument not to a king or a battle, but to a single astonishing night. It is a beautiful theory. It is also a theory with very little ground to stand on. The same problems that haunt every other Serpent Mound idea haunt this one. The carbon dates do not agree with themselves. Some samples push the mound back nearly 2,000 years, long before any supernova in question. Others place it close enough to fit the 1054 event or the 1066 comet, but only just. No artifact has been found inside the mound that says, "Here, this is what we saw." No carving, no story etched in stone, no painted shell that points to a starburst in the dark. You will not find this idea in mainstream archaeology textbooks. The scholars who study the mound for a living tend to file the supernova theory under interesting but unprovable. They prefer the solstice. They prefer the moon. They prefer what they can measure with a transit and a stopwatch. And yet, the pattern is not unique to Ohio. Across the American Southwest, in a sandstone overhang in Chaco Canyon, there is a painted symbol that scholars have argued for decades might mark the 1054 supernova. A crescent, a star, a hand. Some say yes, the ancestral Puebloans painted that morning when the new light hung beside the moon. Others say no. The symbols mean something else entirely, something we have lost the key to. The argument goes on. The paint does not speak. Up in the Great Lakes, petroglyphs of horned serpents coil across cliff faces, sometimes with strange dots floating near their mouths. In the Mississippi Valley, copper plates show winged beings carrying spheres of light. Across the continent, Again and again the same shapes return. A serpent, a circle, a point of brightness, held between teeth or coils or claws. The people who lived here watched the sky carefully. They marked what they saw. That much is certain. What is not certain is whether the great Serpent Mound belongs to that pattern or whether it stands apart for a different reason none of us has guessed yet. The supernova theory is one of many quiet possibilities that lives in the long grass around this hill. It might be true. It might be the dream of people who want the past to be more mysterious than it is. The mound, as always, will not say. The light that may have inspired it has long since faded. The serpent it may have left behind has not. The Shawnee came to this part of Ohio late, by some accounts, pushed and pulled across the eastern woodlands by storms of war and treaty. But they knew the snake on the hill. They had stories for it long before the white farmers gave it a name, and those stories, passed mouth to mouth around small fires, are some of the only soft evidence we still have for what the mound might have meant. You can't hold a story in your hand, but you can hold the things the stories left behind. In old Shawnee tradition, there was a great horned serpent that lived in the deep water and in the deep earth. The people called it many names, and the names changed with the seasons and the speaker. Some called it Misikinipik, some called it the Great Horned One. It was older than the corn, older than the hills, older than the songs that named it, and it did not belong to the upper world of birds and sun. It belonged to the world below, the cold, dark country, under rivers and under stone. Hunters told of seeing its horns break the surface of still lakes at dawn, like two black branches rising from a green mirror. Fishermen spoke of long shadows moving under their canoes. Children were warned away from certain bends in certain rivers, the places where the bank dropped suddenly and the water turned the color of wet slate. The serpent lived in those places. The serpent waited there. What survived of these stories, beyond the spoken word, was carved and painted and pressed into clay. Shell gorgets, those small round discs worn against the chest, have been pulled from Ohio soil with horned serpents coiled across their faces. Some are no bigger than a silver dollar. The lines are thin as thread, scratched with stone tools into the inside of a freshwater shell. And still see the curve of the body, the small bumps where the horns rise from the head, the open mouth swallowing the sun, or the moon, or some round thing the carver thought worth swallowing. Copper plates have come up too, hammered thin as paper, with serpents stretched across them in long curling lines. Pipes carved from soft red stone show the same shape, the body looping back on itself the way the Ohio mound loops back on its hill. These objects were buried with people. They were placed near the heart, or near the head, or folded into the hands. Whatever the serpent was, it traveled with the dead. A French missionary, writing in the 17th century, set down a few lines about what he'd been told by people living near the Great Lakes. He wrote of a long creature that moved through both water and earth, that could swallow boats whole, and that the people made offerings to at certain places along the rivers. He didn't believe the stories. He wrote them down anyway, in tight black ink, on paper that still exists in an archive in Paris. The ink has faded to brown. The story has not. Closer to the Ohio mound itself, early settlers wrote letters to friends back east, describing what local indigenous visitors said when they passed the serpent on the hill. Some of these letters have survived, tucked into family Bibles or sold to small museums for almost nothing. One 19th century farmer wrote that an old man traveling through had stopped at the mound and stood for a long time without speaking when asked what he was looking at. The old man said only that his grandfather had told him to stop here. If he ever came this way, and to leave tobacco, he did. Then he walked on. That letter is in a collection now, behind glass. The handwriting is loose and slanted, the kind of writing a tired man does at the end of a long day. It does not prove anything. It only says that someone, more than 100 years ago, knew the snake on the hill mattered, and knew it mattered enough to stop for. The trouble with old stories is that they shift. Each teller smooths the edges, or sharpens them, or forgets a piece and invents another. By the time the Shawnee tales were written down, the people who built the mound had been gone for centuries. The stories may carry true memory. They may carry borrowed memory. They may carry something dreamed up around a fire in a hard winter. Still, the objects are real. The shells are real. The copper is real. The pipestone is real, cool and smooth in the palm. And every one of them shows a serpent, coiled and waiting, just like the one sleeping on the hill above Brush Creek. Long before any farmer turned a plough over that ridge, long before any surveyor laid a chain across the coils, the people of the eastern woodlands told stories about snakes. Big snakes, snakes that lived in the rivers and the lakes and the deep cold places under the earth. Snakes that wore horns on their heads like a stag, and scales that shone like wet copper in the late sun. The Shawnee told these stories. The Lenape told them. The Miami, the Wyandot, the Cherokee, the Algonquin peoples who hunted the same forests where the mound still rests. Every nation had its own name for the great water serpent, but the shape of the creature was almost always the same. A long body, a curving tail, a mouth wide enough to swallow the moon if it bent down low enough to drink from the river. In the old tellings, this serpent was not a monster the way a wolf is a monster. He was something older than fear. He lived between the worlds, the world above, where the thunderbirds rode the storm clouds with lightning in their wings, the world below, where roots grew down into the dark and rivers ran through stone. The serpent was the door between those two places, the hinge on which everything turned. Grandmothers passed these stories to grandchildren by the warmth of winter fires. They told how the great serpent could be helpful when he chose to be, and dangerous when he was crossed. They told how the thunderbirds watched him always, ready to strike if he came too far out of the deep water. They told how the bravest medicine people could sometimes speak with him if they knew the right songs. And somewhere in those stories, almost lost beneath the layers of telling and retelling, was a thread that pointed back to the ridge in Adams County. A serpent on a hill, a serpent looking east, a serpent with something round held gently in his open mouth. The families who carried these stories did not always speak them to strangers. The 1800s were a hard century for the people of the woodlands. Many had been pushed west, far from the rivers their ancestors knew. The stories went with them, packed into memory like seeds in a pouch, carried across Indiana and Illinois and into Oklahoma and Kansas. Some of the stories grew smaller in the telling. Some grew stranger. Some were spoken only in the old language. And when the old language faded, those stories faded with it. But the serpent did not vanish entirely. Researchers in the late 1800s and early 1900s began to write down what they could gather. They sat with elders. They listened. They filled notebooks with horned snakes and underwater panthers and tales of mounds raised by ancestors whose names had been worn smooth by time. The notes are uneven, sometimes contradictory, sometimes shaped by what the listener wanted to hear. But again and again, a great snake appears, curving, watching, holding something precious in its jaws. Some Shawnee descendants today still speak of the mound with quiet respect. They will tell you the serpent is a place of power, but they will not always tell you why. Some say their ancestors built it. Some say their ancestors found it already old, and tended it, and added their own meaning to it, like a new layer of paint on a house that has stood through many winters. Both versions live side by side at the same kitchen tables, and neither one wins the argument. A holiday gathering, a long table. A young cousin asks about the snake on the hill in Ohio. An older relative sets down her coffee. She tells the story the way her own grandmother told it, with the egg in the mouth and the sun on the longest day. Another relative, an uncle perhaps, listens and then offers a small correction. He heard it different. The egg was the sun itself, he says, or the moon, or maybe a piece of the falling star that struck the ground beneath the ridge in the long ago time. Both are right. Both are wrong. The story keeps moving the way the river beneath the cliff keeps moving, finding its own course around whatever stands in its way. What the family stories preserve, even where the details have drifted, is the feeling. The serpent matters. The serpent watches. The serpent was placed where he is for a reason that mattered to someone, and that reason has not been forgotten so much as it has been folded inward, kept close, held the way the serpent himself holds that quiet oval shape between his open jaws. Step back from the long argument for a moment. Set down the carbon dates and the star charts and the dueling theories about who built what and when. Look instead at the wider country the serpent belongs to. Because Ohio's hill is not alone. The eastern woodlands are scattered with shapes pressed into the earth by patient hands, and the snake at Locust Grove has cousins. Drive north into Wisconsin and you'll find them, low green ridges that take the shape of bears and panthers and birds with wings spread 100 feet wide. Some are coiled, some are stretched long across the grass like sleeping animals. The land there is dotted with them, hundreds in some counties, and many of them turn toward water or rise on bluffs where the wind moves slow across the prairie, travel down into Georgia, and the woods open onto Rock Eagle, a great bird laid out in white quartz stones, its wings spanning 120 feet across the red Georgia soil. Its head turns east, watching the morning. Travel a few miles more, and you'll find Rock Hawk, its twin, made from the same pale stone. Both birds were built by people whose names we don't fully know, and both still stare patiently into the rising sun. Cross into Iowa, and the bluffs above the Mississippi are crowded with bear-shaped mounds, lined up like a procession moving along the cliff. In Minnesota and Illinois, there were once turtles and lizards and long-tailed creatures pressed into the dirt, though plows and roads have erased many of them. The pattern reaches farther than people often remember. From the Great Lakes down to the Gulf, ancient builders shaped the ground into living things, and so the Ohio serpent is part of a family. Not a single strange flower in an empty field, but one bloom in a long quiet garden that stretches across half a continent. That matters. It tells you something the arguments often miss. It tells you that shaping the earth into animals was a way of speaking, a language, a way of saying we were here, and we believed this place was holy, and we wanted the sky and the soil to remember us together. Different peoples in different centuries reached for the same kind of gesture. They built bears and birds and snakes for reasons that may not have been identical, but the impulse rhymed across generations. So whoever stood on that Ohio plateau with baskets of clay on their shoulders, whoever knelt and shaped the first curve of the tail, they were not inventing something from nothing. They were joining a conversation already in progress, a conversation older than any single tribe, older than the maps we use to sort one culture from another. Think about what that means for the village that built it. A quarter mile of coiled earth is not a weekend's work. It needed planners and diggers and people who carried clay up the slope, basket by basket, through hot summers and cold falls. It needed someone who fed those workers, someone who watched the sky and said, dig here, curve there, someone who held the vision in their head while 100 hands made it real. That is the quiet truth underneath all the debate. Whether the head points to the solstice by careful design or pleasant accident, whether the egg in the jaws is the sun or the moon or a comet or simply an egg, whether the builders were Adena or Fort Ancient or both in turn, something happened on that hill that mattered enough to move tons of earth, mattered enough that the shape was kept and remembered and rebuilt across the centuries. A community gathered itself around this hill. They ate together while they worked. They sang, probably. They told the children why the snake mattered, and the children grew up and told their own children. And the story moved forward in time, even when the names slipped away. By the time the first European farmers laid eyes on it, the original builders had been gone for hundreds of years, maybe 1,000. And yet the serpent was still there, still curling along the ridge, still waiting. That is what survived, not the names, not the exact ceremonies, not the precise meaning of the oval at the mouth. What survived was the shape itself, holding the memory of a people who cared enough to build something larger than any one life, larger than any one season, larger than the small disputes of historians who would come along much later to argue over its bones. The serpent is a message in a language we have partly forgotten, but the fact that the message was sent at all, with such care and such patience, tells you almost everything you need to know. Step away from the road now. Leave the small parking area behind. Walk past the wooden gate, past the sign with its painted snake, and follow the dirt path that bends along the ridge. The trees close in on either side. The moon is out tonight, and it sits high above Adams County, like a silver coin laid flat on black velvet. Listen. The first thing you notice is what isn't there. No traffic, no engines, no hum of the wide world. The little town of Peoples is miles off, hidden behind the hills, and its lights don't reach this place. There's only the soft hush of wind moving through oak leaves, and somewhere far below, the slow voice of Brush Creek, talking to its own stones. The plateau spreads out in front of you, long and low, shaped like the back of some sleeping animal. The grass is silver in the moonlight. The serpent lies in its long curve across the ground, every loop softened by night, every bend traced in shadow. You can't see the whole shape from down here. You never could. That was always the point. The air smells like cool earth and wet bark. A faint trace of wood smoke drifts in from some far-off farmhouse, the kind of smell that belongs to autumn, even when it isn't autumn yet. Beneath your boots, the path is packed clay, soft from yesterday's rain. Each step sounds smaller than it should above you. The sky goes on forever. Out here, far from cities, the stars don't behave the way you remember. They crowd in, they pile up. The Milky Way pours across the dome of the night, like spilled cream, thick and bright and impossibly close. You can see the dark dust lanes inside it, the soft glow of star clouds, the steady red eye of a planet near the horizon, the same stars the builders saw, the same river of light that turned slowly above their hands while they shaped the soil. A barred owl calls from the woods to your left, 2 long notes, then a tumble of softer ones, like a question that doesn't need an answer. Somewhere further off, another owl answers back. Their voices float across the plateau and fade into the trees. The crickets are the real chorus, though. They fill every inch of the dark, thousands of them, layered in waves, rising and falling, breathing together. Once in a while, a single katydid clicks from a low branch, sharp as a fingernail tapping wood. Then the crickets swallow the sound, and the night settles again. You walk a little further. The path curves. The serpent's body lies beside you now, just a low rise of grass, no taller than your knee. You could step over it if you wanted to. You don't. Instead, you stop. You stand still. You let the place hold you. The wind picks up gentle, and the oaks above the ridge sigh together. Leaves brush leaves. A small branch creaks somewhere out of sight. Down in the valley, an animal moves through dry brush. A deer, most likely, picking its careful way along the creek bank. Then the brush goes quiet again, and the deer is gone. The moonlight on the mound is the strangest thing of all. It softens every edge. The coils look painted onto the hill. The oval at the head looks like a still pool of water, reflecting back the sky. If you let your eyes go a little unfocused, the whole serpent seems to breathe. You think about how many nights have passed over this exact piece of ground. 800, 2,000 more. Cold winter nights, when the snow lay across the coils and the stars burned hard and white. Warm summer nights like this, one full of insect song and the smell of green leaves, the same owl calls, the same wind in the same trees, the serpent never moving, the sky never quite the same twice. A satellite slides across the bowl of stars overhead, slow and patient. You watch it go. The crickets keep singing. The creek keeps talking to its stones. There's no fear here, none at all. Whatever this place was built for, whatever the builders meant by every careful curve, the feeling that remains in the dark is something closer to welcome, as if the hill itself is glad of company, as if the long quiet of the woods has been keeping a small warm space for you all along. You take a slow breath. The air is cool in your chest. The stars don't move, and the serpent doesn't move, and you are very small under all of it. And for a long, soft moment, that smallness feels like the best thing in the world. Most mounds in the Ohio Valley gave up something when the diggers came. A pot, a pipe of bones wrapped in copper, a bead made of shell, carried up from the Gulf. The earth opened, and the people who built it stepped halfway back into the light through the things they had buried with their dead. The serpent gave up almost nothing. That is the strange truth that shaped everything that came after. When Frederick Putnam stood on the hill in the 1880s and watched his crews push their shovels into the long green back of the snake, he expected what every other digger expected: a chamber, a skeleton, a cache of carved stone tucked beneath the coils, something the builders had left as a key. He searched the head, he searched the neck, he searched the 7 bends of the body, one by one, all the way down to the tip of the tail. He found a few scattered chips of charcoal. He found burned ground beneath the dirt. He found nothing else. No grave, no offering, no name. That single absence changed the way the country thought about the place. The other mounds were tombs, and tombs are easy to understand. People die, and the living build something to hold them. But a quarter mile of carefully shaped earth, raised stone by stone, and basket by basket, with nothing inside it at all, was a different kind of thing. It was a sign. It was a gesture. It was the builders speaking without words, and the words they did not say became the loudest part of the story. The town that grew up around the mound learned to live with that silence. Locust Grove sits a few miles off, a small Ohio town with white churches and old barns and a feed store that still keeps its lights on past dark. The people there grew up knowing the Serpent the way other towns know a river. It was just there. You drove past it on the way to your aunt's house. You climbed the wooden tower as a kid and looked down at the Coils and felt something settle in your chest that you could not explain to your friends from the city. A certain way of seeing took root in those hills. Folks who live near the mound talk about the land the way sailors talk about the sea. They notice the angle of the sun in late June. They feel the cold come down the valley in October, and they know which day the serpent's tail will catch the last light. They keep almanacs in kitchen drawers. They watch the moon the way their grandparents watched the moon, and their grandparents before them. A summer solstice. Gathering grew up on the hill, slow and quiet, the way moss grows on a stone. No one planned it at first. People simply began to come. They brought blankets and thermoses. They sat along the rim of the plateau as the sun lowered over the trees. They watched the head of the serpent point itself at the setting light, and they did not speak much. The Park Service eventually built a small program around it, with talks and lanterns and a fire pit at the visitor center. But the heart of the gathering is still the old thing. People sitting on grass, watching a hill watch the sun. The mound shaped the local imagination in smaller ways too. Children in the county schools draw serpents in art class. The high school sports teams carry snake names. A bakery in town sells a long coiled loaf at the summer market, glazed and braided into 7 bends. There is a tavern with an old oil painting of the serpent above the bar, and a bed and breakfast that hands out maps of the constellations as they appeared in 1066. None of this answers the question. None of it tells you who carried the baskets of clay, or why they chose this hill, or what they meant by the egg in the serpent's mouth. The legacy is not an answer. The legacy is a way of waiting. The town learned, generation by generation, how to live next to something that would not explain itself. That is the rarest inheritance a place can have. Most American towns sit on land that has been stripped of its old meanings, paved and plowed, and renamed until the original silence is gone. Locust Grove kept its silence. The serpent kept its silence. The diggers came and went and found nothing, and the nothing they found became the thing the people there learned to love. A long green shape on a high green hill, holding a secret it has never once agreed to share. People come to the serpent for many reasons. Some come because a book mentioned it once, and the name stuck in their head like a song they couldn't finish humming. Some come because their grandmother kept a postcard of it, taped inside a kitchen cabinet. The colors faded to gentle browns and greens. Some come because they drove past a brown highway sign and felt, for no reason they could explain, that they should turn the car around. There was a woman named Ada who left Ohio in 1923. She was 19 years old, and she carried a small cardboard suitcase and a photograph of the snake on the hill. She had grown up in a farmhouse 5 miles from the mound, and her father used to walk her along the Coils on Sunday afternoons. He never said much. He just let her feel the soft give of the grass under her shoes, and the way the breeze always seemed to move a little differently up there. She went west, the way so many people did then. She rode trains through Indiana and Illinois and into the wide, flat country beyond. She ended up in a small town in Nebraska, married a man who fixed windmills, and lived in a house with yellow curtains for the rest of her days. She never came back to Ohio, not once, but she kept the photograph. She framed it in plain dark wood and hung it above her writing desk. The picture showed the serpent from a low angle, taken by a neighbor who had climbed a wooden tower with a heavy camera. The coils looked like waves of green water frozen in mid-roll. The oval at the mouth caught the light like a held breath. Her children grew up hearing about the snake. She told them it was a 1/4 mile long. She told them it was older than anyone could say for sure. She told them that on the longest day of the year, the sun went down right where the snake was looking, and that somewhere underneath it all, there was a wound in the earth from something that had fallen out of the sky a long time ago. Her children listened the way children listen to stories about places they will never see, with wide eyes and a little doubt and a quiet wish that the story might be true. When Ada grew old, she would sit by the window in the afternoons and look at the flat Nebraska fields. Her granddaughter once asked her if she missed Ohio. Ada thought about it for a long while. She said she didn't miss the towns, or the roads, or even the farmhouse. She said she missed the shape of the land, the way the hills folded into each other near the river, the way the trees climbed the bluff above Brush Creek, the way the air felt different on the plateau where the snake lay sleeping. She told her granddaughter that she sometimes dreamed about the mound. In the dreams, she was walking along the coils, and the grass was wet, and the sun was rising, and she could feel the curve of the serpent under her bare feet. She said the dreams were not sad. They were the most peaceful dreams she ever had. Ada died in 1981 in the same yellow-curtained house. Her granddaughter inherited the framed photograph. The granddaughter took it back to Ohio. One summer, the way some people return borrowed things, she stood on the plateau with the picture in her hand and held it up to compare. The trees were taller now. The fence lines had moved, but the snake was the same long body, the same patient curve, the same quiet oval held in its open jaws. The granddaughter said later that she felt something on that plateau. She couldn't name it. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't joy, and it wasn't anything she had words for. It was closer to recognition, the way you sometimes meet a stranger and feel certain you have met them before, though you know you haven't. This is how the story travels. Not in books, though books help. Not in lectures, though lectures help too. It travels in suitcases and on kitchen walls, and in the soft voices of grandmothers telling their grandchildren about a place they once loved. The serpent stays where it is, but pieces of it ride along with everyone who has ever walked its length, and those pieces settle in faraway houses and faraway towns, waiting to be passed on again somewhere tonight. In a town that has nothing to do with Ohio, a child is hearing about the snake on the hill for the very first time. The story is older than the country, and it is still moving. So here we stand, near the end of the story, with the long body of the serpent still curling across the ridge in Adams County. The grass is soft underfoot. The sky above the plateau is a quiet washed blue, the kind of color old painters used for the robes of saints. And the question that started this whole telling is still hanging in the air, light as smoke. Who built it? When? And why? Every theory we've walked through has a soft spot somewhere, a place where the evidence gives way, like rotten wood. The Adena had their burial mounds and their copper, and the early diggers found Adena graves nearby. So for a long time the serpent belonged to them. Then came the radiocarbon dates pulled from charcoal in the body of the mound. Those dates pointed at the Fort Ancient people 1,000 years later. The argument seemed settled, and then newer samples shifted the dates again, pushing the construction back toward the Adena window, and the argument came loose all over again. So the mound has a strange habit. Every generation of scholars walks up the hill sure they know who made it. Every generation walks back down a little less sure. The alignment is the same way. Stand at the head on the morning of the summer solstice, and the sun lifts out of the trees right where the serpent seems to be looking. That much is true. You can see it with your own eyes. But why a builder would lay a quarter-mile of earth across a ridge just to mark one sunrise is a different question. Other mounds in Ohio mark the sunrise with a circle, or a square, or a simple ridge of stones. None of them stretch into the shape of a snake. None of them coil 7 times. None of them hold an oval in their open jaws. The coils may track the moon. They may track the stars. They may track nothing at all, and the curving shape may be a story rather than a chart. Each theory fits part of the evidence. None of them fit all of it, and the people who could have told us plainly and simply walked these hills long before anyone thought to ask. That is the open door of this place, not a riddle with a missing piece. A riddle where every piece could belong to a different puzzle. Think of how many serpent mounds there are not. Across the whole eastern half of the country, with all its rivers and ridges and old earthworks, this is the one, a single quarter-mile of coiled earth, sitting on a plateau that itself sits on a scar from the sky. Whoever shaped it chose this exact ridge for a reason. They did not choose the next ridge over. They did not choose the high ground above the river. They chose the wounded ground, the place where the bedrock itself was twisted from some ancient blow, and they laid their snake along the spine of that wound. That choice feels like a sentence in a language we cannot read. The letters are clear. The grammar is gone. Maybe the builders meant the serpent as a calendar, the head pointing to the longest day, the coils counting moons, the tail spiraling back into winter. Maybe they meant it as a story carved in dirt, a creature from their own old tales, given a body the size of a village. Maybe they meant it as a mirror, the snake on the ground answering some snake in the sky, a constellation we have forgotten how to see. Maybe all of these at once. Maybe none. Visitors will keep coming. Children will keep walking the path beside the coils, dragging their fingers along the wooden rail, asking their parents the questions their parents cannot answer. Researchers will keep pulling tiny cores of soil from the body of the mound, hoping the next sample will settle the dating once and for all. Each new finding will trim the mystery a little, the way a candle trims itself with use, and leave the flame just as bright. That is the strange gift of this place. Most mysteries lose their power when you study them. This one seems to gather power the longer you look, the more carefully you measure the angles, the more you sense that something is being measured back. The longer you walk the path, the more the silence on the ridge starts to feel like patience, not absence. The serpent is not finished speaking. It has only paused, mid-sentence, waiting for the right listener to come along. And so the fire has burned low, the way fires always do when a long story has been told. The embers glow soft and orange in the dark, and the smoke smells like cedar and old pine. You can feel the cold pressing in at the edges of the room, and somewhere far off, an owl is calling to no one in particular. The snake on the hill is still there. It has been there all night while you listened. It will be there in the morning when the sun comes up over the trees. Picture it now, in this quiet hour. The ridge above Brush Creek sits under a wide black sky. The stars are out, thick as scattered salt, and the air is so still you could hear a leaf turn over. The coils of the serpent rest in their long green line, soft humps of earth covered in winter grass. Frost has settled on the curves, silver and fine, like sugar dusted across a long pale ribbon. The oval of the mouth is dark, the tail is dark. Everything is dark, and everything is waiting. The little museum is closed. The wooden walkway is empty. The pickup trucks have all rolled home down the gravel roads. There is no one on the hill now but the snake